Today, we are diving into a huge topic in education, one that's so important. How do we actually support every single learner? We're going to try and reframe how we think about special needs and, what true inclusion really looks like. So let's just start with this really big question. What if, instead of asking every kid to somehow fit into the school, what if the school was actually designed from the ground up to fit every type of brain? That's the core idea we're going to be digging into. Okay, so first things first, let's get our terms straight. What do we even mean when we say inclusion? Well, a super influential guide called the Index for Inclusion puts it perfectly. It's not about singling out one group of students. Nope. It's about tearing down the barriers to learning for everyone. It's a goal for the whole community. And that idea leads us to our first major shift in thinking. And honestly, it's a profound one. For decades, the approach was basically trying to fix the student so they could fit into a pretty rigid system. But true inclusion, it flips that script completely. The goal now is to fix the system so it's flexible enough for every single student to succeed. Now, what's really interesting is how this breaks down. It's not just about what happens in the classroom, right? It's a three-legged stool. You've got to build that welcoming culture. You have to create school-wide policies that actually promote equality, and then you evolve your classroom practices to make it all happen. They all have to work in sync. So we have this big picture idea of inclusion, but let's get a little more specific. Because if you want to remove barriers, you kind of have to understand what they are. We throw around this term special educational needs, or SEN, all the time. But what does it actually mean? What are we really talking about here? And the crucial thing to get is that it is incredibly broad. As this definition shows, we are not just talking about struggles with math or reading. SEN covers the whole child, their social world, their emotional well-being, their physical abilities, the whole shebang. And this just shows you how complex it all is. Just look at how different places categorize these needs. In the UK, you've got 4 big buckets. In the US, there are over a dozen distinct legal categories. And the OECD even includes things like socioeconomic disadvantage. So the big takeaway? There's no single universal way to label these challenges. Okay, so we've seen the official categories, but you know what? Labels and lists, they don't tell the whole story. To really get it, we have to move past the paperwork. Let's try to put a human face on all this. What do these hurdles actually feel like for a student, day in and day out? Let's start with one that many of us have probably heard of, dyslexia. It's the most common type of specific learning disability, and it's a perfect example for understanding that gap between a student's true potential and how they're performing in school. So for a student with dyslexia, the very foundation of reading is a struggle. Things we take for granted, like connecting sounds to letters, recognizing words on sight, reading smoothly, all of that takes a huge amount of effort, and it leaves very little mental energy for the main event, actually understanding what you just read. And this quote, man, it really hits home, because if reading is just this constant, exhausting battle, of course you're not going to do it for fun. And that has this massive knock-on effect, because less practice just makes that gap wider and wider over time. Now, just to show the sheer variety of needs, look at this contrast. This isn't a complete list, obviously, but it's so telling. On one side, a student with an intellectual disability might have their primary challenges with memory and then struggle to apply something they learned in class to the real world. On the other side, a student with autism might face huge hurdles with the subtle cues of social interaction. They're just profoundly different profiles, which is exactly why a one-size-fits-all education just can't work. Okay, so we've talked about the philosophy of inclusion and the huge variety of challenges students can face. And that leads us to the most important question. What do we do about it? Let's open up the toolkit and look at some proactive strategies that don't just help a few kids, but actually lift up all of them. This right here is the fundamental shift. The old way of doing things was often called the wait to fail model. A student had to fall way behind before they got any real help. The new approach is all about prevention. You don't wait for the house to be on fire before you think about installing a smoke detector, right? A fantastic example of this proactive thinking is the response to intervention model, or RTI. It's just a really logical tiered system. So tier 1 is just great teaching for everyone. Simple as that. If that's not enough for some students, you move them to tier 2 for some extra help in small groups. And only if that still isn't working do you bring in the really intensive one-on-one support of tier 3. And the benefits here are just huge. First, help is immediate. There's no long, painful delay. It also forces schools to use teaching methods that are actually proven to work. And maybe most importantly, it helps identify a learning disability based on how a child responds to great teaching, which is a much more useful and dynamic measure than just a static IQ score. All right, let's look at another really powerful tool in the toolkit. Now, this one might sound almost too simple, but the research is crystal clear. It is incredibly effective, especially for learners who are at risk. It's called direct instruction. Now, this isn't just about a teacher lecturing. No way. Effective direct instruction is a highly structured, carefully thought out method. It's all about breaking down skills into tiny, manageable steps, making sure students really master each one before moving on, and building in tons of review and practice. It builds a rock solid foundation for learning. And all of this brings us to our final and honestly most empowering takeaway. After talking about all these models and categories and strategies, the so-called secret to inclusion, well, it turns out it's something we've known all along. And it's maybe the most hopeful message there is. I absolutely love this quote. It just sums it all up, doesn't it? Good teaching isn't just about delivering information. It's like preventative medicine for learning difficulties. So much failure can be prevented before it even starts. So here it is, the big reveal. All those things we talked about, the clear instructions, breaking things down, the proactive support, they aren't just special ed strategies. They are simply the principles of excellent teaching, and they make learning better for every single student in the classroom. And this just drives the point home. It really highlights the incredible potential that we can unlock when we just focus on high-quality instruction for everyone. It's about raising the bar and giving every student the support they need to reach it. And so often, they achieve far more than anyone ever expected. So we'll end right where we started, with a question that reframes this entire conversation. Moving forward, let's try to stop focusing on what might be wrong with a student. Instead, let's look at our schools, our classrooms, our own methods, and ask a much more powerful question. What barriers can we remove? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. It's a really powerful shift in perspective and definitely one worth thinking about. We'll see you next time.